From humble beginnings to a major jump in membership in recent years, the ACLU of Utah is celebrating 60 years here in our state. Brittney Nystrom is the executive director. She's here to take a look back at the organization's history in the Beehive State. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
So let's start off with how it all started 60 years ago. What are the beginnings of the ACLU of Utah?
Right, so in 1958, we received our first charter to operate as the ACLU of Utah. It all started at the University of Utah with a group of law professors who were concerned about McCarthyism and government overreach, and we've continued for the past 60 years to fight some of those same fights.
Let's get specifically what some of those fights were over the past few decades. As far as a litigation standpoint, talk to us about what you have been engaged in.
Well, most of our work has been on behalf of marginalized populations. In the 70s, we represented women who were seeking unemployment benefits for being fired because they became pregnant. In the 80s, we worked on behalf of prisoners who were held in overcrowded conditions who needed better access to mental health care. And in the 90s, we worked on behalf of high school students who were seeking to form gay-straight alliances on campus.
When you take a look back, especially to your example you bring up in the 70s, where women were being fired simply because they were pregnant. I mean, you take a look at that today and you think, how is that even possible? When you take a look back at some of the gains you've made in the state, are you proud of what you guys have been able to accomplish?
Absolutely. We have accomplished quite a bit. We feel like the state has become a more fair and just society, but we're certainly haven't accomplished everything that we've set out to do. For example, women still have a gap in their wages when they're compared to men, and just this past legislative session, we were not successful in passing a bill to bring about paid paternity leave and maternity leave.
Let's a couple points I want to bring up, but let's go ahead and move over into the lobbying aspect of it. This is a red state, a conservative state. What approach do you take when you're working with lawmakers in making sure that what you would like to see happens?
Well, surprisingly, there is a lot of common ground between what the ACLU of Utah would like to achieve and what lawmakers want. At the end of the day, constitutional rights and a more equitable society appeal to a lot of people, including our elected members of the legislature. So we've been fortunate to forge strong working relationships with members of all political persuasions, and a lot of times what we want is what's best for Utah, and we are able to find common ground on that.
Yeah, I see you guys up at the Capitol every day during the legislative session. Talk about growth that you guys have seen over the years, because specifically within the last few years, you've really seen a spike in membership here with the ACLU of Utah.
Right, and we came from, as you mentioned, very humble beginnings. We started with no paid staff, no office space, just a handful of dedicated volunteers who advised on civil rights matters. In the 1970s, we were happy to see our membership grow to 750, but the elections of 2016 really put civil rights issues front and center for Utahns. And the number of Utahns who became ACLU members and who began to support our work shot up to 7,500, which is the highest we've seen in our 6 decades. And we now have a full-time staff of 11.
When you talk about the election of 2016, do you attribute that specifically to the top of the ticket and President Trump?
I think that campaign and the policies that have gone into effect with President Trump have reminded a lot of people of what's at stake. There have been renewed interest in protecting civil rights. There's also been renewed interest in civic engagement and activism. We haven't only seen our membership numbers grow, but we've seen huge turnouts at demonstrations and protests, people exercising their free speech rights.
Another element that you guys work on in the community is education. Talk about your efforts to get your message to Utah communities.
We can't be there for everyone who's facing a violation of their civil rights, so we work hard to empower Utahns to understand what their rights are. We host Know Your Rights trainings for students, for the homeless community, for anyone who seeks to understand better what civil rights are afforded to them. We also conduct a civil lobby training each year prior to the legislative session, and we'll deploy legal observers upon request for marchers or protesters.
All right. Appreciate this discussion. Unfortunately, our time is out, but great to check in with you and look forward to another 60 years.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right, you bet.